A lot of people are asking why art is important during the war, and there are a lot of reasons. Cultural diplomacy, representation, preservation of artists and cultural organizations. But for Izolyatsiya, work with artists is always work with the future, because artists are pioneers, frontrunners, people who see the future the way it should be.
I believe that art is important in addressing climate crisis, because artists have this power to make people experience things differently, make dry data into something more emotional and visible. And we also highlight certain practices that already change the world for better.
I think society needs someone who will kind of decipher the soul, decode this knowledge, to bring more attention and awareness. It's not in a direct way, of course, but this is exactly why art works so deeply, because it's built on the metaphors.
We're visual arts producers. We're based in Newcastle in the northeast of England. We've always been interested in the space between intercultural dialogue, diversity and internationalism. We have an almost 30-year history of working with extraordinary artists interested in social and environmental issues. Regrounding is an exchange programme that's been supported by the British Council. It's been supported by the Arts Council in England. The idea behind regrounding is to consider the environmental impact of industry. The relationship with IZOLYATSIA, who are our partners, started in 2015. I was lucky enough to have a British Council secondment, it's called Canny Creatives, to Kiev, where I met our partners there, and indeed Lucy Nachai, who's our current curator in residence.
Izolyatsiya is a cultural foundation that had been established in 2010. The first home of Izolyatsiya was the city of Donetsk in Ukraine, which was established in the late 19th century with a huge wave of industrialization that happened in the region. In the late 19th century, a large number of new cities were founded around new factories, new productions, and new industry, especially around chemical industry, metal production, and of course coal mining. From the very beginning, we were rethinking industrial heritage, industrial past as a foundation for a new future of the region. A couple of years ago, we started to develop a new program in the city of Solidar, which is a city built around salt mines. We started working with smaller, decentralized communities, and this brought us a huge result that we wanted to share with our partners all around the world. So this became a foundation for our new project with D6, which works in a similar environment.
It's a program that was developed prior to the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, with the aim of sending 2 UK artists to the Donbass region. But with the full-scale Russian invasion, we had to change our plans.
We changed the program to invite Ukrainian artists to come to Newcastle to learn local context and build their own projects based on what they have seen in the northeast of England.
I explore entanglements of nature, technology and society, the politics of our relationship with the environment. My main tools are film and photography.
Mostly I work with the subject of mythology. I'm interested in the times when people did not divide themselves from the nature, from the world around them. Mostly I work with the analog photography and also analog video. And I consider this as a special way to collaborate with reality, because you cannot really control the result. So it's very much like reality itself.
The project I'm developing for the residency is a film in conversation with my documentary exploration project about me and my grandmother. We love each other a lot and we have strong spiritual bond, but still we have some verbal clashes about political views, about some views on society, on life. I decided to try to overcome this distance by engaging in the practice we both enjoy in gardening. But when the war started, both for myself and for my granny, this practice became something completely different from what it used to be before.
In my artwork here, I'm very much inspired by the fantastic paradoxal force of coal, its creative force, and at the same time destructive. I grew up in an industrial area in eastern Ukraine, in Donetsk, and my grandfather, who I grew up with, he was a miner. Being a kid, I was playing mostly at the mine, and also I spent lots of time in my childhood on the slag heap. I left Donetsk when I was 17, exactly because of its industrial heritage, and I went to Crimea and started to live in Sevastopol until it was occupied. And now, facing the Russian aggression for the third time in my life, I feel like I don't really want to move anywhere, and I want to face the reality I am in. And this whole situation with the environmental crisis is my personal attempt to see what is ahead.
The artist, Lucy IZOLYATSIA, came to the UK and tried to understand a little bit more about the post-industrial context of the northeast of England, connecting to what was formerly known as the Mining Institute in Newcastle, but is now known as the Common Room, and with the NewBridge Project, where we are going to now go on to have an exhibition with the artists. And some of the solutions that have come forward in terms of urban community gardens, in terms of nature park spaces. So how do we deal with that industrial legacy here in the northeast, and how do we talk about it?
The residency gave me a totally new perspective on the practice of gardening, and I would like to show what is the role of gardening in times of crisis, immediate crisis as war or COVID pandemic, but also long-term crisis as climate change. This practice survived through such a long historical period. I was wondering what exactly fuels it, and I came to this concept of traditional ecological knowledge, their spiritual bond with their environment. I compare traditional ecological knowledge to compost, to humus, because I believe that these embodied experiences that people had with land are layering on top of each other, influenced by historical events that are happening, and it's interesting to see how this collective body of knowledge has been formed.
Being here in Newcastle, I went to the Woodhorn Museum and I saw the exhibition of Pitman painters. I also went to the Blast Beach to see the sea coal coastline, and also I was working a lot at the Common Room in the archives to immerse in the history of mining industry from the point of 350 million years ago to the point of like 200 years ago. And both of these histories, ancient and modern, turned out to be quite political. Like, speaking of Ukraine, until recently we were the third largest producer of coal in Europe. Still, we have 148 mines in Ukraine. 67 of them are unfortunately on temporarily occupied territories. And speaking of England, here a new mine is going to be open in Whitehaven.
It's so important to cite ourselves within a global context, and the issues that we might have in the UK, in Newcastle, are mirrored in other parts of the world, and we can only draw strength by sharing those experiences.
When we came here, we found a lot of really interesting connections that run deep under the skin of people from Ukraine and from Ukraine context. The coal mines, all the technologies that were used by miners in Ukraine were this way or another invented here. All the troubles that we faced in the 90s with miner strikes, shutting down mines, the whole process of working and building new strategies for revitalization of post-industrial areas have already started here 10, 20, 30 years ago.
During the residency, when I visited community gardens here in Newcastle, Scotswood Garden, Wildroots Garden, Comfrey Project, I noticed that many of these initiatives appeared on post-industrial spaces. And it's interesting how people grow new life there. Many things reminded me of this mythological nature. I researched Hadrian's Wall and I discovered the concept of Genius Loci, a protective spirit of the place. It was interesting for me to see the connection between this protective spirit and local ecological knowledge, how they work together. And Genius Loci in traditional Roman mythology usually appeared in the form of a snake, another very powerful symbol of regeneration of life.
So, being interested in mythology, the miner's work itself reminded me of the old Greek concept of katabasis. It's a journey underground, underworld, by a hero in order to get something or find something very hidden. and it's hard to find another thing hidden so well as a coal. So I came to this idea of comparing miners going underground with the hero's journey with catabasis. I am very inspired by the myth of Persephone. According to this old Greek legend, the winter comes because Persephone should stay with Hades half of the year. And looking at this global warming, what if miners have mythological thinking? Would they be offering some gifts to Persephone in order to get the black gold from the underground? Or how miners' lunch table look like if their wives would be complementing the table by putting coal on it, because it's also a gift of nature.
When I came to the UK, it was interesting for me to see differences, how people relate to their environment. I feel that in Ukraine people still practice it. Indeed, it's very practical. Whether in the UK it's more mythical, it's very interesting to see how this practice that sometimes considered to be subsidiary or quiet is now becoming more and more loud.
For me, this residency was quite important because I've got a chance to reconnect with my past, with my family history, with myself, and the landscape that formed me, that shaped me as a person.
I hope my work is gonna plant this seed into the head of each viewer and grow into conversation. This conversation is important because it's nice to see what British people can learn from Ukrainians and vice versa.
In addition to the importance of working with artists who are in exile, in addition to the importance of highlighting the situation for artists from Ukraine, the Regrounding Project forms part of a necessary move towards a just transition, to think environmentally about what our solutions might be, what our responsibilities are, but to think about it in an equitable way.
The work inside regrounding is also really important, and it's something that will be extremely useful when Ukraine will gain the victory and will start the reconstruction of the region.